And we're now live! Yay! Okay, I'm going to start off with a bit of exposition, or at least a bit of explaining behind this. Since I had a brain fart and didn't actually work on a next adventure, and not everyone can make it this time around, so we're going to do a Hangout Hijinks episode, which is kind of just meant to be filler episodes, basically, of 2 characters or more, or just characters hanging out in a way that isn't just playing a session. They could be just hanging out at a job workplace, they could be hanging out in town, and just hanging out in a space that isn't we're on a mission and have to go fight something. I'm playing here as myself, and I'm technically the DM, but hopefully what I wanted to do with Hangout Hijinks episodes is that anybody can be the DM. You can tell anyone to roll for anything, be it insight, perception, whatever you'd like. And I'm here today playing Rhodey, along with the wonderful Queen, who I believe is playing Cordelia again?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I had considered bringing in my other one, but I decided against it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, shall we start? And you don't need to, it really doesn't bother me if you, any kind of typing noises, but you don't need to mute if you don't feel like it, or if you decide that it starts to get annoying, you can just not do it, and we can just keep playing like usual.
Yeah, just give me a second. I need to give something back to a family member.
All right. Well, I think I'm gonna just continue chattering just so we don't have too much dead air. Like I said, I didn't think to do a lot of writing for the next session. I had a bunch of ideas that I noted down really quickly, and I started writing an idea for this one, but I didn't act for what would be the next session, but then I got distracted by the real world. It happens. But, yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm still really proud of how that title card came out. I drew it all by myself, and it looks nice.
Alright, I am back. And the title card does look really nice.
Thank you! I actually experimented with using his 3D thing in Clip Studio in order to do the sign, and then just drew the rest myself with paintbrushes after I'd done the sign.
Oh!
Yeah. The 3D object things are neat, but I do have to admit there are times where I wish they could just put like a little bit of line work just to make it easier to help you draw, but that could just be me.
I will take your word on it, because I've never done digital art.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. Some people prefer drawing, some people prefer digital. I like doing digital just because it means that I have an endless amount of ink and paper.
That would be convenient.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm going to say that we are back in the tavern again. Cordelia has probably taken a moment away from Zero. You haven't moved on to the next town yet. You're just kind of taking a break, and you and Zero have probably been debating on where you wanted to go next. After all, it seems rather silly to go traveling without at least an idea of where it is you want to go. Least of all if you pick a place that isn't as friendly as you thought it would be, or is friendlier than you expected. So you have been debating, and you've stayed an extra day or 2 in town, and you've decided to step away from Zero for a bit and take a break, and you've decided to go down to the tavern and have a meal there. And for the most part, everyone's been very nice in town. You haven't had to worry about anyone being mean, and most of the town's people are very friendly to you, especially in the wake of you helping them with their bandit problem. Everyone is being very nice, and every once in a while you've found that if you go out somewhere and you spot something little that catches your eye, there's usually someone who's willing to either offer to help you pay for it, or they'll give it to you if it is small enough. Today, you've decided to go down to the tavern for dinner instead of having dinner at the inn where you were staying. And you know that there will probably be fairly busy, so why don't we start off with a perception check as you arrive.
Okay. $15.
You've been having a good day. You're in a good mood. You walk in and you notice that the tavern today is very, very, very full. There are a lot of people eating a lot of foods and generally just hanging out, and the atmosphere is very friendly and jovial. As I've said, the place is very full, and you don't really see anything unusual. However, you do spot one thing, and that's seated in a table in the back is a familiar face, a familiar green and white UPAN, who seems to be sitting by himself at one of the back tables.
Cordelia probably gets kind of excited and clamors her way over to say hi to Rhodey, because it's probably been a little bit since she's seen him.
Yes, not only did she do that, but you've also introduced my character, Rhodey. Rhodey is sitting by himself with a fairly small meal and a small drink. Nothing too out of the ordinary, except there seems to be just a small sandwich and a basket of fries, and that seems to be as much as he's bought, along with a drink that looks to be a mix of something, but you're not entirely sure what. Now, you've hustled over to the table, but he hasn't seemed to have noticed you. He seems to be staring into his sandwich rather distractedly, or at the very least, he's not paying attention to what's going on.
Cordelia probably clamors up to his table and is like, "Hi! It's been so long! How are you doing?"
Rhodey jolts a bit, not expecting to be called out to, and when he looks over at you, and then he smiles a bit and says, "Oh, Miss Cordelia. Yes, I'm all right. It's been a few days since we've seen each other. Did you?" He pauses, looking around. Says, "Did you come for a meal? Oh, of course, this is the tavern. Of course, you're here for something to eat." Then he gestures to the seat across from him and says, "You're welcome to join me if you'd like."
She sits down and is like, "Oh, thank you. Yeah, I did come to get some food. Zero's off doing his own thing, and we're trying to figure out where to go, because adventuring, you gotta go places, and I think Zero's got a plan, but I don't really have one."
Rhodey is nodding along, and he says, "Yes, I can understand that. I don't always have a plan of where I'm going to head to next, either. Although, well, this is a suggestion you can run by him later, but sometimes when people are traveling through, they'll hire groups to help them. This is usually for merchants and such, but perhaps if you look at the board later on, you might find someone looking to hiring extra help to move product or something to the next town. It tends to be how I travel around."
Oh yeah, that does seem like a good idea. I've definitely seen people doing that.
For a moment, both of your conversation is interrupted by one of the waitresses of the tavern coming over, a fox, a most likely Frankenolly fox, and says, she comes over and says rather cheerfully, "Oh, hey, it's one of our heroes. We got two in at the same time. How neat. This is so neat. What can I get for you, darling?"
I'm fine with just a sandwich and some milk, please. Thank you.
Sandwich and some milk. Oh, that sounds fine. What kind of sandwich? BLT, peanut butter. I think we got some jelly in.
BLT sounds fine.
All right, 1 BLT and a milk. I'll be right back. And with that, she heads away again, and Rhodey, smiling a bit, says, well, I do have to admit, there is always one nice thing about getting involved in affairs, is that people always tend to be, well, I like towns like this. The people here are always very nice.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing to, like, I don't know, be called a hero and stuff.
Rhodey laughs and smiling and says, yes, being called a hero is rather strange if you're not used to such a thought. I rarely get called it myself, but well, it's different. It's different, but not a bad kind of different.
Yeah, I'm just not used to having a lot of attention on me.
Surprisingly, Rhodey starts nodding, and if you would roll perception for a moment, or rather insight.
8.
She misses it. You notice that he nods along and he says, hung, and while there is a little something to his expression that you can't quite place, the only thing you can tell is that it's not really a bad thing in his expression as he nods and says, yes, I can understand that. There is something about having eyes on you that can be rather uncomfortable. Especially, well, at least it's earned.
Yeah.
So, actually, just out of curiosity, where are you from?
Well, I grew up in, like, this little temple. It's kind of in the woods, kind of out of the way. We don't get a lot of people coming by, and usually the people who do are, like, looking for something, like adventurers and stuff.
He says, so, I can't think of very many temples that are like that, but I imagine it's one of the ones that's much further out from most towns, if I'm guessing correctly?
Yeah. A lot of the people who come there, like, who deliberately come there, are coming there because they want to get away. It's dedicated to Ilmater, who's, like, the god of, well, he's the god of, like, people in pain and stuff. So the whole thing is, like, trying to help people who are in pain.
Rhodey's expression froze for a moment upon hearing the in pain part, but then you notice that he starts to relax a bit when he hears the help people in pain. He says, oh, I'm not familiar with that one, but well, helping people in times of trouble, that's always an admirable thing to focus on. Do you have any family? I remember when you were speaking with Zero, you mentioned a friend of yours. Well, might I know more? I may have worded this wrong, but he's basically asking you to tell more about your life at the temple.
Well, what?
He was basically saying he overheard you mentioning your friend Damien when you were talking to Zero the last time you saw each other, and he's asking to hear more about them.
Oh, yeah. So, name's Dane. Doesn't talk about where he came from, but I think well, actually, I probably shouldn't talk about his past. It's rude to, like, talk about people when they're not here, but His name's Damien. He's a rubber hose like me. He's kind of like a demon rubber hose. He's got like horns and a little tail. I used to kind of pull on it, and he didn't really like that.
No, I don't think there are very many toons with tails who enjoy having it pulled.
Yeah. He was really worried when I said that I wanted to go out and be an adventurer.
Rhodey nods along and says, yes, that makes sense, but, a demon and a cherub, how interesting. Well, at the very least, it sounds like he's a good friend. Being an adventurer can be dangerous depending on where you go, and not everyone is friendly.
Yeah, that was what he said. His exact words were like something along the lines of, the world's gonna eat you alive.
Rhodey laughs a bit and says, well, I can, it sounds as though he's a bit, well, I don't quite think that such an extreme thought as that, but, well, it really depends on where you go. I know at the very least if you go out to the areas that are more real kind dense, things aren't always as friendly, I've been told. It's much better here on Inkwell for toons.
Yeah. I know he was like mostly joking, but he said that, like, you know, the world's scary and people are mean, and people at my temple believe in like non-violence, because you know, Ilmater is all about like helping people in pain. So I'm not actually all that good at fighting, and like I'm not supposed to be fighting, and he was worried about that and me like surviving in the world, I guess.
Well, I can understand that. It can be dangerous if you don't at least know how to defend yourself, but, well, I can think of plenty of places that, well, it would seem more like that there would be plenty of places that would scramble at the chance for a good cleric in their town, especially in places where where things tend to not always go well. And he pauses for a moment and just pops a fry in his mouth before taking another sip of his drink and says, well, I suppose that's good, that you at least want to go out and help people, but you should be careful at the very least. Things can be quite dangerous, especially recently.
Yeah.
And can you roll a history check? Now, just to clarify, history is not just ancient history, but also like local news. Oh, 18. Yeah, in that case, Cordelia, you have heard enough while traveling in the short period of time that you've done it, that Inkwell is actually facing pretty dark times at the moment. A lot of bad things have been happening, and a lot of monsters and, well, dangerous people have been coming out of the woodwork. So, yeah, you know it's dangerous. You know that a lot of people are under a lot of stress at the moment.
Yeah. I kind of just charged out without really thinking. You know, like, I don't regret leaving because I think it's important to go and help people, but the more I'm out here, the more I kind of realize that I maybe should have planned more. Because I don't really I don't even really know where I'm going, and Zero's got a plan, but I don't really, except for helping people. And she's starting to look like a little sad and nervous.
Yes, I can understand that. But let me let you in on a little something. With that, Rhodey leans forward and lowers his voice a bit and then says very quietly, "To be perfectly honest, I have no idea where I'm going either. I've mostly been traveling to as many local towns as I could and just, well, meeting people and seeing places. Because the world is quite big." And he pauses that, and he looks a little far away as he leans back after saying that.
The world is pretty big.
And do you want to try rolling insight again to see if you pick anything up now that you've gotten the chance to hang out with him a bit?
Yeah.
Oh!
22!
Insight 22. Yeah, you got a nat 20 plus 2 more. Nice. In that case, you notice that Rhodey doesn't just seem far away. In fact, the whole sentence that he just said sounded a little odd, because despite mentioning this and asking a lot about where you're from, he hasn't really said anything about where he's from, and he seems very thoughtful, and it seems a little odd that someone that has traveled as much as he says he has seems to have no plan of where it is he's heading. And that strikes you as a little odd, along with the odd kind of melancholy that seems to be about him.
She kind of frowns a little and is like, "So you've traveled a lot, huh?"
Rhodey nods slowly and says, "Yes, at least in the past, half year or so, I've done a lot of traveling."
So you're just like wandering? Because you said you didn't have a plan. Or are you just sort of wandering around?
Rhodey nods and says, yes, I am. I don't really have a destination. Just, well, I don't really have anywhere to go, if I'm being honest. Which is the main reason I'm wandering.
Did something happen to your home?
And for the first time, you notice that his color dips a bit darker than it had been before, and he says, "Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't know."
You don't know? Like you don't remember where you're from?
And with that, he pauses, not expecting that statement, before finally his shoulders sag a bit, and he looks directly at you, and he says, "Well, actually, yes. I..." He reaches up and rubs at the side of his head, and then continues, "I'm actually an amnesiac. I don't really know much of anything about myself."
Oh.
And you're interrupted a moment again as the waitress who you made an order from suddenly pops back up at the table and drops your food off with a cheerful, "Here you are, hun." Then she looks at Rhodey and says, "Just let me know when you want more or when you want to pay." And with that, she walks away again. And Rhodey looks back at his food and says, "Well, yes, I don't know much of anything."
Hmm.
and you are welcome to go in depth with your questions, if you want. Because, like I said, this is a chance for characters to get to know each other.
So you don't have any memories. Did you just, wake up one day somewhere?
Rhodey takes a bite of his food and then says, yes, I woke up about 7 months ago now, in the care of a woodsman. He said he'd found me unconscious in the woods and brought me back because I hadn't been in good shape. And then I stayed there for about a month, but, well, I didn't know who I was or where I was from, so I decided to go looking.
That does explain the wandering without a plan thing.
He chuckles a bit and then says, yes, it does. I've been sort of making a ring around the town where the woodsman was from, and stopping by various places and just seeing if anyone knew me, and thus far the answer has been no. I do wish I knew what happened at the very least.
Did you wake up with anything on you?
Well, I had the clothes on my back and a pack of clothes along with a journal and a pen, but beyond that, I didn't really have anything. I just woke up.
Was the journal blank?
Well, it was yes and no. The journal there were pages missing. And with that, he actually reaches into his pocket and pulls out an old, worn, leather, real kind type journal. And he says, this was the journal. And with that, he flips it open and shows you the front section where the front clump of pages had very obviously been ripped out completely. And he covers part of it with his hand, clearly the most recent entry in a slightly wobbly handwriting that you vaguely remember from the note that that led to you meeting him in the first place. Yes, it's a bit of a mystery. I've been trying to figure it out. You would think that out here in Gisnap, where there are so few UPAons, that there would be at least someone who had met me before, but so far everyone has just sort of ignored me, or if I actually got up the nerve to ask if they knew, responded with they hadn't the faintest idea. And with that, he closes the journal and returns it back to his hammer space.
I know this probably isn't what happened, but I heard a story one time from one of the other lands that some guy was turning real kind into tunes. I know that's probably not what happened here, but that's where my mind went. But maybe you got it from a real kind or something. Was there a name in the journal or?
Well, actually, funny you should ask. With that, he actually pulls the journal out again, and then he shows the inside of the back cover, where you see the name Rhodey E written on the bottom. As far as I can tell, I think the only owner of this journal has been me. And it's you should mention that story. I think I did actually hear about that, but I thought it was more local here, down by one of the port towns. And I'm going to step out of character for a moment and say this, and to let you know, this is actually a thing that has happened in the Toonkind universe, in the actual Toonkind server called the First Draft House, where there was actually a series of stories that revolved around that as a plot line. I think that was one run by Universe herself.
Yeah, I was remembering the 11th hour with like Zan.
Yes, I think it was actually called 11th Law. That's a good one.
Yeah, the 11th Law.
Yeah, I only listened to part of it just because I had been on a conductor binge at the times, or not conductor, an engineer binge at the time, so I'd actually skipped over those in order to get to engineer episodes.
I only listened to part of it because forced transformations make me feel icky. And that's what happened to Zan.
Yes.
But,
yes, they're interesting from a story standpoint, but when people go into detail, they can get really, really, really uncomfortable. I totally get that.
Exactly. But, yeah, that's why I thought of it.
But, yeah. Anyways, continuing on. This is just something that I'm going to say, but what are Cordelia's thoughts on seeing this amnesiac UPA in tune with this journal that has the spelling of his name in it that's had the front part ripped out, apparently?
Well, her thoughts are like, something went down here. And she's also thinking, like, does he know his name is Rhodey? Or did he just assume it from the journal?
Well, she can ask that.
Okay.
Basically, think of the hijinks episode as we are both DMs. You can tell me things that are going through your characters' heads, and you can also tell me to roll for things for what Rhodey could be trying to pick up from Cordelia.
So, do you know? Did you remember your name was Rhodey, or did you just assume from the journal?
Rhodey pauses and tilts his head a little bit and says, and he seems to be thinking for a moment, and then he says, I'm certain at the very least that my name is Rhodey. I'm not sure if Elder is my last name, is my surname, I'll admit. I actually took that from where the huntsman found me. He said he found me by a bunch of elder trees in the woods, but no, and he pauses and he's nodding very firmly and says, I'm certain my name is Rhodey. I can feel it. I know that is my name.
Okay. So, the journal probably belongs to you. But the question is, how did you get it?
And, well, that's the question for all questions, isn't it? I would assume that I'd bought it somewhere, or it had been gifted, possibly, but, well, I don't know. And his shoulders sag a bit, and he says, I remembered lots of bits of information, things I know and things I don't know, and they don't always make sense, but I know them. It's just that I wish more of them could explain who I was, and, well, I think the closest thing that I have to something strange about what I can remember is that he pauses, almost considering backtracking, then he says, and do you want to roll either persuasion to get him to tell you, or something else?
I will roll a persuasion. 15.
You know what? I'm gonna give it to you. He says, so, what does Cordelia say?
Well, if you remember something, it might be useful in figuring out who you were and where you came from.
And he rocks to this, he rocks his head from side to side for a few moments, and he says, "Well, strangely enough, it's more of a language that I know. For some reason, I know Undercommon, which is very strange. Frankly, it's an exotic language for one, but it's also one that most people don't really know or use." And Undercommon, if you're wondering, is language that a lot of the underground living races speak, like Drow and under dwarfs. It's kind of got a little bit of a rap of being like a bad language, just because a lot of evil races that aren't, evil races that aren't like demons or creatures like that speak it, which is what makes it such a weird thing for someone who is attuned, or someone who, as far as you have seen, is very nice, to know this language.
Could you repeat the races that would know it, because you cut out a little?
It's basically like it has a rap for being an evil language, just because races like Drow and Underdwarfs and these dark or quote-unquote evil races are the ones who primarily use it. At the very least, the ones that aren't like demons or eldritch things, or it's basically like the watered down, almost nicer version of languages like Abyssal. So it's got a bad rap, but it's just a language. It's not like got any spellworks, and it isn't specifically tied to anything evil. It's just that a lot of these darker races are the ones who normally use it.
Maybe you knew someone who spoke that?
Yeah. Well, it's possible that someone I knew taught me. I feel like someone I knew taught me, but I don't. Well, I admit the things that I remember strongest are more feelings than information, and well, I feel like whoever taught me that wasn't a bad person, and that's really the most I know for how I know that language. Yes, it's quite the mystery. There are a few other things, though, but, well, a lot of them is just information without context.
Context?
Yeah, context is the reason why. It's a bit like a passage from a book. It doesn't really make sense if you just recite that one passage, if you don't know what came before it or what came after it. But I know a few odd things, like, oddly enough, I know how to take care of a vehicle, and I don't for the life of me know why I would know that, especially since so few people have them.
So wherever you came from, people had vehicles, maybe?
He leans back a little bit, and so that he's kind of looking up at the ceiling. Then he looks back down and says, "That would make sense, but well, as I said, I don't know. For all I know, that I could have just known someone who was a tinker who taught me it. I don't." He looks a bit frustrated now, and he says, "I really wish I just had. I just wish I knew a bit more, that I could just find something that could lead me in a better direction. But, well, the best I can do is travel from place to place and hope I hear something that can get me in the right direction."
She's kind of frowning and leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed. And she seems to be thinking very hard. And you can roll a perception check to see if she might be what she might be thinking about.
Let's see if I can remember how to spell perception. Hey, 21. Dirty 21.
She does not know. She is just as confused as Rhodey. She has lived most of her life in a secluded temple, so she is maybe not the best person to be asking about this, because her knowledge is extremely limited.
Well, that makes them two peas in a pod, because he's an amnesiac and he's been wandering blindly for about 6 months, so heck, she probably knows more than he does about general world, just because he knows nothing. So, they're both very confused and very tired, and Rhodey has been dealing with this for a long time, and he's very tired.
Man, I'm wishing Damien was here. He knows stuff.
Well, I wish I could just find someone who knew anything that could point me in the right way. I think the closest I've had for an idea of what to do would be to make my way to UPA, but, well, that's a long journey.
Yeah. Maybe you could write down a list of everything you know.
Well, he sort of tilts his head, and he actually looks a bit thoughtful at that and says, "Well, I've been writing some things down," and he didn't put away his journal last time when he showed you the name. Instead, he hesitates for a moment, then very carefully actually turns the journal and actually shows you some of the things that are written in it. And he actually hands over the book to you. So roll an investigation check, just for basically reading it and looking through it.
19.
Ooh, nat 20 with a -1. So,
Still pretty good.
yeah, still pretty good. Anyways, Cordelia starts flipping through it, and you notice that while Rhodey's handwriting is rather wobbly, it looks almost like it used to be neater. Just vaguely, where you can see letters are starting off a bit, looking rather neat, but then they kind of start to devolve as he goes down a page. But other than that, his handwriting is fairly neat, if wobbly. And you notice that he has actually written things down, like a few of the early ones are just him writing down where he is, as well as who he's spoken to, and he gives a few names. And there's a few that pop up, such as Name Les, which, based on what you're flipping through, seems to actually be the name of the woodsman that Rhodey mentioned had found him, and he has a few passages where he just mentions how Name has been helping him, like helping tend to injuries and helping him relearn how to use things, including some of the weapons that you had seen him carry. And there are a few other pages that mention towns nearby that you remembered hearing, and again he mentions that he's been through them, but he also laments that no one seems to recognize him, and there isn't a lot, and some entries are like 3 to a page where only 2 or 3 actual sentences have been written, but you can pick out a small list of skills and such that he's written down, or things that he's observed while traveling. Including one that you mentioned that catches you just a little bit off guard, is that it seems to mention that he's done card tricks before, but other than that, for the most part, it's more of a very brief peeks into things where he's just noted things down.
I don't know if this is rude to bring up or not, but do you maybe know why your handwriting got all, like, wobbly?
Rhodey chuckles a bit and says, "Well, I have a guess. One of the injuries that I had was apparently a very bad blow to the head." And he actually lifts a hand up and rubs at a spot near the back of his head. And he says, "I think that's where most of the memory loss is, but while I'm certain my handwriting was better, I think that I think the head injury also had a relation to that. Although it is a little odd for a toon to have a problem like that, but not impossible."
I mean, yeah, that does make sense. By toon rules, maybe if we just bonk you on the head again, you'll remember. I know that probably won't work. But
Rhodey has this moment of alarm. It's like, oh no, she's not going to ask if she can hit me with her warhammer, is she? But then he relaxes a bit when she hears her continue, and he says, well, some people would certainly suggest that. I think I'm of the personal opinion that further injuries don't always help." And he gives a weak chuckle and says, "So, no, I'd rather not try to hit my head again and see if that fixes it."
yeah, I feel like if we tried it might make things worse, and that would be bad.
And unable to help himself, Rhodey starts laughing a bit and says, yes, it would be." And with that, he very gently pulls the journal from your hand and returns it to his hammer space. He says, "Well, like I said, a lot of my life has just been wandering and trying to find hints of what was before. And, well, I haven't had a lot of luck, but then again, well, nothing's ever easy, is it?"
Yeah, that's true.
But
I feel kind of bad that I can't be more helpful. Just not really sure.
Rhodey smiles a bit and says, "It's all right. And, I mean, no offense, but I hadn't really expected any help. It's something I just have to figure out on my own, and I'll find it when I find it. Whenever that may be."
Yeah, it would be probably a bit much to just hope you'd immediately find something. Some of the amnesiac people we get at the temple don't find anything for like years.
Rhodey nods and says, yes. But, well, at least even if I can't remember where I came from, I can find places to go. And he waves a hand kind of vaguely and says, I do have to admit, it's nice, in a way, to actually be able to just travel and not be worried about having something to go back to or being away for too long. And his color darkens again a bit, and he says, it does bother me sometimes that, well, I feel like I left something important behind, but I suppose it's nice to just have the option of going where I like and not having to worry about anything stopping me.
Must be kind of lonely, though.
And he nods and says, it can be at times, yeah. But, well, it was just as lonely staying with Name and just not knowing anything.
Yeah, that's true. Probably better to keep moving than just wallow in not knowing anything.
Rhodey nods, and there isn't really much more he can think to say, aside from taking another bite of his sandwich.
Cordelia's gotten kind of quiet, and it kind of seems like she might be thinking about something.
Another insight check?
Yeah.
Ooh, 18.
It's clear she's got something on her mind that she wants to say, but she's not sure if she should.
And Rhodey just kind of looks at her and just gives a small gesture like... He gives a kind of go on gesture, but you get that he means that if there's something on your mind, you're welcome to say it.
Oh, so I don't know if this is like relevant or true, but do you think maybe it's a cult thing? I know that might be like jumping to conclusions, but I don't know. I've heard about cults doing bad stuff, and I don't know. She kind of trails off, kind of embarrassed, looking like she really wishes she hadn't said that. Like, oh God, that's such a stupid thing to say. Why did I bring that up?
Rhodey actually looks a little bit... He looks a little bit like you just caught him off guard. Like he hadn't expected a statement like that. And he says, well, I certainly don't think so. He paused for a moment and said, then continues and says, the closest I've had for a lead on how I lost my memory is that, according to Name, my injuries had been looked like I'd been hit by something large, and there'd been a landslide in the area, so I'd always just assumed that I'd gotten caught in that landslide, and that was how he makes a vague gesture, how I got that. So I don't think there would be cults, although, well, never be sure. But I don't think so. No, that doesn't feel right. And he's thinking very hard, but it's more in that manner of, I'm trying to think of how that could connect and not making a connection.
She laughs like a little sheepishly and is like, yeah, I kind of figured it was kind of far-fetched. Honestly, most of the stuff I'm coming up with is like something out of an adventure book or something, like, what if you were investigating something and got too close and got punished for it, and cults and
Oddly, when you mention the looking into something and getting too close, Rhodey seems to pause at that, and he looks very thoughtful. Would you like to roll insight? Ah.
4.
You can tell he's thinking, but other than that, you have no idea what's going on in his head.
She's just still caught up in being kind of embarrassed.
You know what? I'm gonna kind of give in a little bit and have Rhodey very quietly say, getting too close to something. That. And his expression starts to shift a bit, like he's just hit on something. Getting too close to something. That feels... I was getting to something. Yes, I think that may be closer.
Wait, seriously? I was just taking stabs in the dark.
Well, I don't think it was anything cult related, but I feel like that feels closer to whatever it was I left behind. I was going to... Oh, it's slipping through my fingers. But I feel like I was going to tell someone something. And now his expression is one of deep thought, and it's very obvious that whatever train of thought he's trying to grab is just... He's chasing it, but he's not getting it.
So maybe you were an investigator or something?
And he says, or something. I don't think I was investigating, but I think I was going to tell someone something, but I can't remember who or what. And now he's completely forgotten about his food. He's now very deep in his head trying to grab at this... He's trying to grab at these thoughts almost like grabbing at smoke. He knows there's something there, but he can't get his hands on it. And then at last his shoulders kind of sag and he says, That's all I can remember. At least it gives some direction for the how, at least.
Yeah, it's a start.
And he actually starts to smile a bit and says, yes, it's a start. And then he raises a hand and the waitress comes over and he just kind of holds up his drink and asks for a refill. And you don't know what it is he's ordered, but it sounds kind of fancy-ish. But it's not something you're familiar with. And the waitress just kind of nods and says, oh, sure, I'll get you that in a sec. And heads off again. Says, that gives me a place to start. Although, well, it doesn't give me a where, but it gives me a how. It gives me an idea of a how. Then he looks over at Cordelia and smiles and says, thank you. I don't think I would have thought of that.
Well, I'm glad I could help, especially since I was mostly just kind of shooting in the dark.
And Rhodey's green actually brightens a bit, turning a bit more leafy as he gives a lopsided grin and says, well, sometimes the best way to help is just to offer a different perspective.
Yeah.
And we've gone through an hour, so I think this is technically a good wrap-up point for just an hour session of two characters hanging out. So
Progress has been made.
yeah, at the very least, if you run into Rhodey again, and this is something to just make note of on your sheet, you're going to get an advantage on future insight checks for him. It just means that you know him a little bit better, which means that it's a little bit easier to kind of tell what's going through his head in the future. So I'm just kind of giving giving points for advanced help for an advantage in the future.
I'm not entirely sure how that would work.
There should be just an extra section or a notes section.
Okay.
And just write down in the other section that you've got a little bit of advantage when you're rolling insight checks for Rhodey.
Okay.
And I'm gonna note the same on mine. Or actually, why don't you tuck that into the allies section of you get an advantage roll when doing insight on Rhodey.
Okay.
All right. So both of our characters finish their respective meals and say goodbye for the night, where you learn that Rhodey has been staying at a different inn in town compared to the one that you've been staying at, and you go your separate ways with farewells, although before both of you leave, you both take a moment to check over the boards and see if there's anyone in town asking for help, and that's where we have our pull away scene of the two of us finishing our meals and heading over to the board and just kind of taking a look and seeing where that could lead in the future. And that's everything. It was fun.
Very interesting.
Yeah. It was fun just having a nice chat with you and kind of exploring our respective characters a bit.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm going to try and aim for another 2 weeks before having another session. And you are welcome to chat with other people and have your own kind of hangout hijinks in like the RP channels or even over voice if you want. But yeah, I think we're done for another 2 weeks or so.
Okay.
All right. So, see you then.
See ya.